storefront so you can look at the front.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's rocking what?
I'm taking extra flash just to see if we can finish it right here.
Alright, I'm out of here.
Well, they're going now. Get ready.
I think I'm heading north.
Alright.
Who's got clacker?
Do we have arcade or do they have it?
We still have arcade.
3, 2, 1.
Tell them going in.
Freezer and storefront.
Get the power.
Send it, brother.
Watch arcade. Watch arcade back. They can't come the other way. They can't come
Nice.
through.
GG.
Good execution.
Got it.
Green, we just censor office and dog, right?
Yo, what? It like swings open? Dude, this is slick.
I'm dropping.
Going.
I'm pushing.
Nice.
Alright, here we go.
Alright, what's the plan?
Are we going all out?
Yeah. But they could do this. I don't think that they'll try to open storefront.
I feel like storefronts if they're gonna play.
Door charge freezer and then wall charge storefront so you can look at the front.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's rocking what?
I'm taking extra flash just to see if we can finish it right here.
Alright, I'm out of here.
Well, they're going now. Get ready.
I think I'm heading north.
Alright.
Who's got clacker?
Do we have arcade or do they have it?
We still have arcade.
3, 2, 1.
Tell them going in.
Freezer and storefront.
Get the power.
Send it, brother.
Watch arcade. Watch arcade back. They can't come the other way. They can't come
Nice.
through.
GG.
Good execution.
Got it.
Green, we just censor office and dog, right?
Yo, what? It like swings open? Dude, this is slick.
I'm dropping.
Going.
I'm pushing.
Nice.
Alright, here we go.
Alright, what's the plan?
Are we going all out?
Yeah. But they could do this. I don't think that they'll try to open storefront.
I feel like storefronts if they're gonna play.
Door charge freezer and then wall charge storefront so you can look at the front.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's rocking what?
I'm taking extra flash just to see if we can finish it right here.
Alright, I'm out of here.
Well, they're going now. Get ready.
I think I'm heading north.
Alright.
Who's got clacker?
Do we have arcade or do they have it?
We still have arcade.
3, 2, 1.
Tell them going in.
Freezer and storefront.
Get the power.
Send it, brother.
Watch arcade. Watch arcade back. They can't come the other way. They can't come
Nice.
through.
GG.
Good execution.
Got it.
Green, we just censor office and dog, right?
Yo, what? It like swings open? Dude, this is slick.
I'm dropping.
Going.
I'm pushing.
Nice.
Alright, here we go.
Alright, what's the plan?
Are we going all out?
Yeah. So they could do this. I don't think that they'll try to open storefront.
I feel like storefronts are gonna play.
Door charge freezer, and then wall charge storefront, so you can look at the front.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's rocking what?
I'm taking extra flash just to see if I can finish it right here.
Alright, I'm out of here.
Well, they're going now. Get ready.
I think I'm heading north.
All right.
Who's got a clacker?
Do we have arcade, or do they have it?
We still have arcade.
3, 2, 1.
Still I'm going in.
Freezer and storefront.
You get that power.
Send it, brother.
Watch arcade.
Hello everyone, I'm TH Pine, the community manager for Due Process, and I'll welcome you very much to this very special episode of Community Hours, I guess, technically, to this roundtable discussion with our creative director Alexander Baard and 3 community members. And I'll introduce the panel members. So we'll start with the man himself. Hi Baard, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
That's good to hear. So maybe to the people who are not super in the known, give us like a 1 or 2 sentences description of what your job is at GEC.
I founded the company with Vincent, and I suppose over the years my roles has changed many times, but I've always been creative director, and what that means now is setting priorities for the team and essentially laying out where we're going to go and what we're going to do. So that is what I do.
The man who's making the big decisions, I guess. So
Indeed.
that's why we have you here. All right. Okay. Let's go through the other panel members. So first off, we have Revenant. Hello.
Hi guys.
Maybe
How's
introduce
everyone
yourself really quick. I mean, most people probably know you, but
Hi, I make videos for the game. You probably found me in the training menu. I love the game and wanted to help the new player experience a little bit. I also help run the DPL.
how long are you playing already?
I've been playing since the late end of the alpha testing, so all through beta.
All right. Next on the list is Roach. Hi.
Hello.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. How long are you playing the game?
I've been playing the game, I think about 2 weeks before beta started. I'm a DPO player currently on Rats. I frequently post feedback in the DPO and DPL, so I'm a pretty active community member.
All right. And last but by no means least, we have Billboard.
Hey, how's it going?
Let us-
I'm
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
I've been playing. I'm an alpha tester. I won DPL season 1, and I'm an ex Rainbow Six pro, so I've know my way around competitive FPSs. So I'm hoping to see Due Process get to that point, maybe. Who knows?
All right. Sounds like a good mix. That's why I've chosen you. So I guess. Bart, do you want to have any introducing words, or should we just go ahead with the first question?
No, let's do this.
All right. Let's do it. Then I'll say Revenant, feel free to shoot first.
All right, my first question is a simple 2-parter. What should decide who wins a round? Is it a better plan or better aim?
Well, I think the reality is that it's still an FPS, which means that you have to have comparable aim skills, or if it takes half a second for you to acquire and shoot a target, right, versus some of the guys in the DPL, it doesn't matter how good your plan is, right? However, I think there's a point when everyone is at similar skill level where we want essentially the overall plan to be the deciding factor in how the round went. And the answer is that it's always going to be a blend, because you need the there's some really great moments where someone outshot their way out of a really bad situation in the DPL, right? And you know, it's always going to come down to a bit of both. But clearly, I mean, we wouldn't have made this game if we didn't want planning to matter, you know?
That makes sense. Would you say like that ultimately, if the two sides are fairly evenly matched in their mechanical skill, that the plan should be the deciding factor?
Oh, totally. I mean, if they're equally matched, then what else would be the deciding thing, you know?
Right. Does anyone else have a comment on that question or wanted to add to that?
That was actually what I was going to say. I was going to say, I mean, in theory, if you know everyone is evenly matched mechanically, I feel like it's clearly the team with the better plans should be winning.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also comes down to that, like, no matter how good your plan is, if the opponent is gonna just like have way better aim than you, you could get behind them, shoot them in the back, and miss 5 bullets. Well, they've got plenty of time to turn around and tap 3 in your head, like. So I think it has to be a pretty good mix of both. Like, no matter how good your planning skill is, you have to have the aim skills to back it up, and no matter how good your aim skills are, you have to have the planning to back it up.
I did want to. Oh, I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, I did want to say that on sort of like the non-pro level, something to factor when planning for the broader community is their capability as a team, because sometimes the best plan isn't elaborate in any way, right? It's just the plan that your team can actually execute on. And honestly, sometimes having a really simple plan that takes advantage of, you know, some principle that your team can follow is going to pan out better than some big brain strat, you know, because you have to factor what your team is actually up to do, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, in my experience, honestly, quite often the simpler plans end up working best, because if you make this super complex plan, somebody's bound to get confused, or if like somebody dies that was like integral to the plan, well, now you have to make huge adjustments during the round, and it just causes a lot of confusion.
I think another pretty important part too is adjusting the plan, right? Like it's one thing to make an initial plan, but let's say you come across something you don't expect, and you know the better team is going to be the one that is able to adapt to whatever they come across and are able to change their plan on the fly.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say mid-round calling is arguably the hardest part of the game.
All right. Seems like we have that topic somewhat covered. It's not too like it's hard to find specific answers for this, I guess. So the answer is here apparently somewhere in the middle. So I'd say we move on and have Roach ask the second question.
Right. So yeah, right now in the game, unless you're playing with the team in the DPL, there isn't a huge amount of progression to be found, like within the game itself. Like the current progression system with levels and ranks doesn't really mean much to most people in my experience. Are there any plans to add a better progression system so that people that aren't really interested in the DPL can still have something to grind for?
Absolutely. I mean, that was literally the meeting I had before this was talking about that system. How do I put this? It wasn't the most important thing by definition, simply because we prioritized other things ahead of it. I think while some of those things are necessary, I don't think it was necessarily the best prioritization on my part. I think I underestimated just how much progression is necessary nowadays. But yeah, we're figuring out what that plan is, and we're ready to embark on implementation within the next month. We're just trying to figure out essentially what is the intersection of low implementation cost and like actually compelling and interesting, because you know, if you don't have progression that people cared about, right, you just wasted your time. So it would actually be very helpful if the community is interested in that and has opinions, if they want to just DM me with progression that worked in another game that really spoke to them, would help me understand essentially what the best moves available to us are, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I heard it
makes a lot
here.
of sense.
Spam his inbox.
It's dangerous. Are you sure you want us to do that?
Well, I just ask that people be responsible with it, because I still have a block button, right? And if you're just gonna annoy me, then I'm not gonna. Oh, good. Here comes the first message. But yeah, essentially, just I did want to say one more thing. There are two progressions, right? One is essentially the casual / customization progression, right? And the other is the ranked progression. And I think that obviously our ranked progression system is not great, right? It is literally the simplest possible thing that could be implemented. We do want to expand on that and make it more robust and meaningful in the way that many other games do, right? But I think that ranked progression is far more substantial than the casual progression, in that if a simple number, or like platinum or whatever the signifiers, if those tokens are meaningful to you and you're striving to get to them, and the path to do so is consistent in how it rewards you, right, as opposed to just being a total entropy, right? I think people will invest in that a lot more than getting some items, right? That isn't to undermine, like, there's definitely some pull in character customization, and that was what I was talking about when we were talking about our progression system, right? But really, like, what you want is for people to care about how adept they are at the game, right, as opposed to how much time they've spent in it,
Yeah, for sure. Like, people want to know that they're getting better at the game.
Right, yeah. And I will say, like, both our systems suck at that. We know.
Yeah,
It's
I have a feeling
a
that
secret.
I have a feeling that one of the main problems with the current ranking system is, like, for example, if you play CS:GO, and somebody asks you, "Oh, what rank are you?" You want to say global. Like, that's what you want to say, because, like, everybody will then think, "Oh, he's actually good at the game." But I don't think there's really anybody saying, I'm at this rank in due process. I don't think there's really much meaning behind it at the moment.
Well, it's just like I'm R whatever, right? And
yeah,
it's just a number, right?
I think that there definitely needs to be the kind of bragging rights there. I think really the only bragging rights you can say at the moment is, like, I'm in the DPL, the upper division kind of thing. That's like the best bragging rights you can get at the moment in due process.
Yeah, but I think even being in, say, like, rivals is meaningful, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah, like, both these systems are what we're going to be focusing on in this next period, right? Like, I would argue the only greater priority is performance, right? So and I would say they're pretty equal in their importance, right? So it is the first thing on our mind, and that's why I'm kind of asking around, like, okay, well, if anyone has ideas, just throw them at me, because hey, maybe something good will come of it, and might not be exactly what people are talking about, right? But you'd be surprised just how much inspiration you can get from community members just telling you, hey, have you considered this?
I mean, I think one good implementation of where you can kind of get across of that more casual, like, unlocking cosmetic things, or like whatever it be, along with that feeling of becoming better at the game and being at the top of the class, which you guys kind of already have implemented a little bit is, the leaderboard is definitely a help, because you even see that happening in like things like single player games where there's like maybe like time trials or something like that. There's also you can look at maybe like a charm system, like how Siege does it. They they give you a reward for hitting X rank to be able to show off how high you've gotten, or like to show off if you're maybe like, let's say, top 500 or something like that.
Yep.
All right. Sounds good. So progression is being worked on. Well, yeah. Let's move to the next question. So Billboard, if you please.
Yeah. So I got a bit of a heavier question, which is definitely what a lot of DPL players are wondering. Do we at all know when we will see a change, and more importantly, an upgrade in the tick rate of these servers?
So we have a specialist on our team named Shiloh, who we hired before the end of last year, and like that is what he is doing, right? We're let me think about this. Basically, where we're at is
optimization.
Yeah, in order to increase tick rate, right, you need to increase the performance of the server simulation, and we're in progress on doing that. And he actually just tested out a I don't know, we tested out a build recently on some of those improvements that will enable tick rate, right? What it did was it uncapped the client FPS, and that was the first step in a long road of us making performance improvements to the game. But what we're hoping to do, I don't think that anything will come by the end of the season, right? But of course we're gonna improve our tick rate. Like, that is precisely the goal that he's trying to achieve, along with improving client FPS, right? And eventually we'll get to a point where this game's running at a respectable frame rate and doing so smoothly. So that's what I said when performance is top priority. And it's not like client performance is the only thing that matters in that, right? Like, server responsiveness is also key, right? I just think that there are other factors at play, right? Like, obviously tick rate matters, right? But if all you can play against is some guy in US Central and you're playing in, I don't know, Eastern Europe, right, you're going to have a bad time. And so it's not the only thing, right? Because, like, even if you're playing against that guy, right, and you're happy with your connection to US Central, right, like, there's still going to be experience compromises that are bad. But like, totally, that is what we're working on, right? Like, I would say, there's nothing more I can do to allocate in terms of resources to it. Like, it is that is to say that it's very important, and we're putting, like, the best stuff that we can on it, so I guess our best time between here and there. Matt is working on hit reg, right, and hopefully we'll have something before the playoffs, a substantial update to that. So even if they're not the most responsive, your shots will land correctly. I think it's a really important improvement. So it's being worked on.
Good to hear.
Yeah, it's really good to hear. Just on the kind of on that topic, I think it's actually really good that we have quite a high time to kill, like, compared to other games, because let's say you have, like, poor, like, latency to, you have a high ping against on the server that you're playing on, and that kind of that messes you up during a gunfight, and you spray down a guy, and that the amount of bullets you put into him should have killed him, but he managed to kill you just because of ping, pretty much. Well, he's going to be left on 1 HP, so when he goes into the next gunfight, he's going to die. So it's not the end of the world if, like, one bullet, you don't get to get off your final bullet that would have killed him. He's still going into the next gunfight at a huge disadvantage, unlike in other games where you can get, like, one tap to the head and you're dead, and he has 100 HP and you have 0.
I think communicating that to the player a bit better is crucial. Like, right now, like, it still sucks when you shoot a guy and he doesn't die, right? Like, I would say that it's sort of the worst of both worlds in that regard, in that this guy feels like he's had all of his health removed to the point where it's pointless, right? But also, you didn't get the kill, so you both feel bad, But,
I actually just had Ghetto DM me asking, would we be able to get damage feedback at the end of the round? So, like, after the round is over, would we be able to see how much damage we did to the different enemies during that round, so that we would know, oh god, I just needed one more bullet on that guy, and that's why my teammate won the next gunfight, that kind of stuff. I think it would help with some of the frustration there. Do you think that would be coming anytime soon?
I wouldn't say it's coming anytime soon, but in principle, it's very doable, right? It's just, again, I don't think what people grasp, and hey, it's okay, because, just how many priorities there are and how little time there is to do anything means that you're really selecting, like, small handful of improvements to do out of hundreds, and so it's something that we'll definitely have probably in a year or two, right? It's just all that kind of stuff is like, it's stuff we're conscious of and stuff that we want to do, but it's just like, I just can't emphasize enough how much it is just a question of priority, right?
That's fair enough. It's very tough.
All
right.
I would just add, just as a general principle, right? Like, that really what you want is the game to feel like when you shoot a guy, right? That, not that you got the kill, right? Because we could just make it everything's a one-hit kill, but avoiding that scenario specifically, right? Where it's like, well, I feel like I should have killed this guy, but I didn't. But at least I know that I let him. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure how meaningful that scenario is to you guys in terms of satisfaction, right? But for me, I would rate it pretty low, right? And then being completely deprived of your health on the other end also kind of sucks. But it is what it is. We want people's consequences to matter, right? So that means there kind of has to be consequences for everything, So that's just some of the ways things will pan out inevitably, right? I will say that, like, high TTK is here to stay. It's just it allows plans to matter more if things aren't determined in a split second reaction / fortune test, right? So
kind of like a little bit of damage from a Molotov, then like a random wallbang hit you, and then one guy got off like a bullet off on you, and all of a sudden you're like down 70 HP, and you're like, geez, okay. That's kind of that struggle throughout the round is really good.
All right, sounds like we can move on. Good discussion, everyone. It's Revenant's turn again, so please go ahead.
Yeah, so since we're talking about priority, or you talked a lot about prioritizing things at GEC, I think that's actually a topic that a lot of people are curious about. So I'll ask this. Why do we see why are simple gameplay elements like E-lights and even suppressors something we didn't see earlier? Or why did the E-lights come out of nowhere and not release at the same time as the changes to darkness?
It's a complex machine. Basically, that is a coordination issue on my part. And sometimes things get released without being fully evaluated and cleared for release, and I'll take ownership of that, right? Because it's ultimately me who has to say this is going in the game and not, right? But frankly, like, the emergency lights did not get to where I wanted them to be before they went out. I don't think it is the end of the world, because you can always tune the values. But I think knowing what we have now, right, like, it would be interesting to hear what the community thinks of, like, okay, well, we have these two features, right? The lack of a bug, I guess, is a feature, right? That is to say, dark, as the DPL calls it, and emergency lights, right? So now the question is, how do we want to tune emergency lights to fit in with darkness? And essentially, what would the community have their role be and their intensity be in terms of their importance, and not just sort of like the light intensity, right?
Right. Are these systems that can work on their own, and that's also maybe part of why? I mean, I use that as a specific example, but
oh yeah, they're completely independent.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the gameplay and the flow and the pacing and the strategy, are these things you like to test independently of each other before compounding them?
You are assigning a degree of intentionality that did not exist in their release, right? That is to say, darkness got fixed, and you guys got to understand that darkness getting fixed was something that's like, we've been working on that for like 2 years, and it's just one of those fucking bugs that exists because you're dealing with an engine that you did not write and have no control over, and you kind of just gotta keep hacking solutions and hope something works, right? And that's like the issue. And so there's that, and then there's the release of emergency lights, right, which was again, it was just like a right hand left hand not talking to each other problem, right, where I don't think it was a well coordinated approach. And how about this, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Could the three of you guys summarize what you believe community sentiment is on the emergency lights?
Yeah, I think so. I want to hear Billboard first, and then I'll add my notes to that, or even
Cool.
Roach.
Well, I'll keep it short. I still can't see.
Okay.
At least on Factory, it's not a fun time. But I don't know. I think I could. It'd be nice to tune them up a bit. I'd like to see what I'm shooting at. That'd be pretty cool. But otherwise, yeah, I don't really have too many in-depth thoughts with them. I haven't been able to play with them a whole ton as much as I've wanted to. But for sure, at least going off my experience.
In other words, no one turns out the lights.
Yeah. To be fair, well, okay. People always turn out the lights on like Factory, and especially Dome. Dome is really tough to deal with having lights off. And especially too, even like there are times even where flares kind of work against you, just because of even how bright they are.
Yeah, that's something I've
So-
seen a lot.
I think just in general, the lighting it can be a rough time on either spectrum, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay,
Roach?
Well, in terms of like the community's opinion on E-lights, through like scouring the feedback channels every now and then, I think the main thing I've seen brought up is C-Store having kind of too many of them, and them being too long. Like, you can kind of go into like an office or something, and there will be like 4 E-lights around you, and then when you kick a door, there's an E-light on the other side of the door, and to shoot them, it's pretty difficult. Takes a lot of time, especially if you're shooting on the other side of the door. But then it's kind of the opposite on something like Factory, where the E-lights don't really affect most of the factory floor. Unless you're in something like Office, where I think usually there's like a ton of them around the tops of Office. On Dome, I think you only like see them in like rooms. They're like these little kind of disco spotlights, and you can shoot them out. I feel like half of the people playing the game don't even know they exist, to be honest. But
I was gonna say I would add that in just real quick, because sometimes it doesn't feel like they're very noticeable at all. Like it,
Yep.
at least on Dome Factory. C-Store's another story, but
yeah, it's kind of C-Store and Dome Factory. Like Dome Factory, there's like too little of the E-lights, and C-Store there's too much of it. I'm not entirely sure how you could adjust that, but that's the general opinion I've seen from the community.
Yeah, I think those are both right. I think I had a big conversation today about visibility in the game. But I'll first say that E-lights, in that period of time between dark and getting the E-lights, a lot of people were really desiring the E-lights because they think it's a really good gameplay dynamic. So at its core, I think it's the correct thing for the game to have. But as these other guys illustrated, I don't think that every player is aware of how to utilize them and play with them. And also, there's visibility issues in terms of the red lights being too much, or in the case of the NVGs, which are often, of course, paired with power, when you have NVGs on, your visibility is a little muddy, especially when combined with all of the factors that tie together: muzzle flash, lack of suppressors. Then you put the E-lights and a flare in, and it becomes a little bit too jarring, a little bit too messy, I think.
Certainly, yeah.
But definitely at its core, I was a strong proponent of adding the E-lights in as soon as possible after dark came in. So specifically speaking to that aspect of my question, like, these are good gameplay elements. I just think it needs polish.
yeah, when I can't hack the system by turning up my monitor gamma to C, I'd like to have the E-lights actually help me out.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, we obviously worked very hard on that use case of people gamma hacking.
Dark is very much dark.
Yeah. I mean, my monitor has
sure.
like I don't know, it's like called like darkness
Night vision
booster or
mode.
something,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah, it's
even with that on, right, like it doesn't seem to work because there's just no data there to so success there. That's good.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
I'd say like consistency is not great with emergency lights, and hey, but the cool thing is that that's actually a really easy problem to fix, right? Compared to, say, fixing the darkness, right? It's just really it's a question of what's the role of the lights. Are emergency lights meant to illuminate for combat, or are they meant to provide lamp posting so that you can figure out how to get from one end of the level to the other, right? Another question is how lost should a player be allowed to get, right? Because it's like, if you're stumbling around in a dark room in real life, right, it's pitch black, you can still feel everything around you, right? And you'll be able to form a mental model of what the space looks like and navigate through it quite easily, right? In our game, you're probably familiar with that space in real life to begin with. In our game, you're not. And then B, there is no sense of touch. And so, there might be other things beyond like the emergency lights to help with that navigation problem, like simply you know, we have like a little light on your face that has come and gone in the project, but its purpose was to create near field illumination so that, you know, you would just see the kind of faint outline of lockers in front of you or something, right? So yeah, it's just sort of like my main problem with emergency lights is if you make them too good, the value of lights out disappears completely. And
Yeah.
you kind of need some like way, like we have them right now on doorways, right? The advantage being that they work really well as lampposts, since if it's an emergency light, it's probably on a door and you can probably make it out. But the disadvantage is that shooting through the wall to hit the emergency light on the other side is kind of non-intuitive, and that is the intended case of how you would Sam Fisher your way through a dark space, right? Then there's also the problem of like, in order to do that, it's like in order to gain the lights out advantage and maintain it, you have to be thorough in destroying all these E-lights, and that process is both slow and predictable, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of like I guess the broader point is that the problem with making a game like this is every single little decision you make matters in terms of design, and there are all sorts of horrible trade-offs that you have to make, right? Like, level becomes easier to navigate, but the coolest moment in the game, in my opinion, right, is when you have a plan that involves knocking the lights out, the enemy doesn't anticipate it, and you sweep them, right? Like, that's fucking cool. And yet it's really hard to get that moment if there are just emergency lights everywhere, right? In unpredictable locations, you know? So, yeah, I guess why I'm asking for community input is it helps me think deeply about the problem if I'm confronted with stimulus about it, right? Because it's very easy to play a game like this over and over and over again and then start to ignore all the little things that aren't quite right and bother you because, again, there's so many other priorities that you kind of just forget about the small stuff sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I think going back to the effectiveness of like the super dark on maps, I think C-Store is also bad because the rooms like Arcade and Freezer have kind of ambient lighting even when it's really dark.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, especially if power's in there, you go in as an attacker, turn off power, turn on your night vision, and you can't see anything because of the ambient light.
Like
but the defenders can see you. They're kind of hidden in the dark storefront or somewhere like that, and they can see into Teller. And it's kind of like, well, that kind of just, you know, went against me more than it helped me. And it's a similar thing on Dome with Pit, and I believe on Factory with Toxic. But those aren't as bad of scenarios because the rest of the map is so much bigger. But, you know, on C-Store, Arcade and Freezer are generally on like every map, and they're usually
can I clarify something?
pretty important areas. Yeah.
When you say visibility, you're talking about, say, are you talking about the enforcer's ability to make out targets in a somewhat illuminated environment, or are you talking about how they are unable to comprehend how visible they are because they got the nods on?
It's kind of a thing that, like, as an attacker on C-Store, if it's a map where like Arcade and Freezer are in like pretty important positions, where I'll either have to rotate through or something like that, I feel like if I turn off power and go into those areas, I'm putting myself at a disadvantage because for starters, I'm going to be kind of blinded by the ambient lighting if I have my night vision on.
Yeah.
And then if I take my night vision off, the other rooms that I'm going to be going into are going to be pitch black, and that kind of just gives the defenders an advantage because I'm in a room that's lit up and they're in a room that's pitch black.
Sure.
And I can't turn on my night vision because I'm kind of blinded. I think that's one thing with C-Store that makes turning off power even less important alongside the E-lights.
I will say, I think it's well, first off, it's going to take, I feel like, maybe some trial and error, but The way I view it is I think it's of how elites should kind of impact things, and especially just power in general. At least if the current dark system is gonna stay in, is I feel like it should definitely be a thing of timing. So when turning off the power, it should be a well-timed turning off the power, rather than you turn off the power and you just kind of win, which is kind of what it feels like on some maps as a defender, especially if you for whatever reason might not bring any flares or don't really have many flares. It sometimes feels like if the enemy team gets the power, you just kind of lose the round entirely, even if they don't time the power with the execute of their attack onto the site at all.
That's great news to hear, because we've created a problem and I have a solution for it. But no, I like, not to be flippant, but I'm saying that the art is creating problems, right? Like, what you're trying to do when you make a game like this is create problems for the player to solve, right? And the hard part is creating the problems. The easy part is coming up with solutions for the problems, right? But yeah, the art of creating problems is the most difficult thing, and I think it's why you kind of end up with a lot of single-player games, right? That because their threshold for inflicting pain on the player is so low, right, for tolerable, that they're unable to actually create any meaningful problems for the player, and you're just allowed to do anything. It doesn't really matter what you do. You could throwing knife everyone, or you could stealth kill, or you could just blow up the whole fucking, I don't know, outpost or whatever the fuck you're playing, But yeah, like the fact that, okay, defenders, the lights go out, it's really bad. Excellent. Because it's supposed to be bad, right? Well, the problem is they don't have the right verbs to deal with the situation. Obviously, they've got the flares and they can anticipate the situation, right? I would say that's why we have like the body lights, right? Is so that you're not totally doomed when the lights go out. But ideally, we want to get defenders in a state where they're hedging against the darkness play, right? And they're doing so in a considered way, and they kind of remember that this can happen to them, right? So I think that's really the tough part. Is it's like, oops, the lights went out, and we kind of forgot about it. Is bad. We don't want people just forgetting about this possibility, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's a very interesting discussion. I actually want to add on one quick question I hear from the community sometimes about this topic. You kind of indirectly touched on it earlier. There was talk about the ability to shoot elites from the other side of the door. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
That's how it's supposed to work.
All right. So are there plans to implement that soonish?
Well, that's an interesting. Sounds like there's Revenant actually came to us with a document about how a bunch of hitboxes in the game are kind of fucked up in their density, and that means that bullet no go through for objects where it should, and it might be that is what happened there. So I'll check in with the content team. The idea was, okay, you've got these two emergency lights that are on the opposite side of the same door, right? So naturally, when you shoot one, bonus, you just kill the other light behind it. That was the expected behavior, So yeah, it's news to me. I don't know what happened there.
All right. Good to know, I guess. Well, I say that's a good point to look into. And
I wanted to say one more thing. Sorry, just like a point. I think it was Billboard was talking about making targets out is difficult in night vision. Yeah, that's bad because, like, what you want, right, is if you are intentionally trying to blind the attackers, right, you want to have a verb for that. That's cool. You don't want to have, like, well, the lighting conditions are so variable in a level that naturally you end up just kind of blinded here and there, right? Like, that will be addressed. There will be a pass, done on the NVGs to fix that issue. And yeah, like modern day NVGs are designed to use like variable apertures and all sorts of other techniques to deal with those lighting situations. So it shouldn't be that way. You want the Enforcer NVGs to feel very, very good and powerful in their application and not be kind of clunky, you know?
Yeah, you want
Like,
consistency.
they're not supposed to
with
be the clunky class, right? Like, that's the defenders are supposed to have clunky, right? Not the attackers. So
Yeah, for sure. That's
Yeah,
great
it's
to
good
hear. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on. Roach, feel free.
Yeah, so my next question was again about ranked. From time to time I see players complain about the matchmaking and ranked being unbalanced. Is there anything in the works that you think could help like balance ranked more? Or do you think this is simply something that will solve itself when the player base grows?
well, I don't want to wait for it to just get solved by the player base growing, right? Because it's pretty clear that if a player base is going to grow, we need to make the iron hot by striking, so to speak. So yeah, that said, it's kind of an impossible dilemma, right? Because when we were doing the alpha, there was a period in time where people could not play with their friends. They would get split up from them. This destroyed our concurrency. Like, it made the alpha into a ghost town very, very quickly when we had that. So the principle there is that if someone is playing with their friends, you obviously cannot get in the way of that no matter what, right? Now, when you apply that principle to ranked, what do you do when people stack their whole team of like DPL players or something, right? Yeah, what's the play? Because like basically you can not match them ever, right? Which, okay, we could do that. Or we could, currently the system is basically, well, it will just expand the matchmaking criteria eventually to it being wide open, and they will get matched against someone to just murder, right? That's bad, right? The only reason that it works that way right now is, I guess what we fear is that appropriately matched teams, due to ranking differences, may become like, it's one thing to match people who are like level nothing against the best people in the game, right? But if there's a bunch of people who are like pretty good and they match against other people at the top, right? That's okay. It's not the best situation, right? But comparatively, it's much better. The problem is, if you tune the threshold, it's really easy to end up in situations where certain people will just not be able to match ever, and that would be bad. And I'm not saying that it's not a problem that we can't get out of. It's just more like you can only fuck up like that for a little bit before people just quit the game forever, right? So that's the danger. On the other hand, I think there are some creative ways around this problem in the meantime. Obviously, we just like the player base to be high enough that we can have a ranked mode like anyone else, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, we could handicap people, right? we could, and that could go for both, say, casual and ranked, right? Of that, like, you can sort of increase your threshold by, like, your matchmaking threshold by being willing to be handicapped, right? If there's a huge elo disparity. Something that Aaron came up with, that is Ozymandias, our QA guy and build manager. He suggested, I think, basically, what if you disable like inventory slots in really high disparity cases? That could work, for instance. That is to say, like, if you had to play against the DPL guys, but they only had pistols and one inventory slot, that would probably be a bit more fair than them having access to everything, right?
I mean, yeah. If you're facing up against 5 people that, like, bought the game a week ago, that have never met each other before, facing up against, like, one of the top DPL teams, that probably would be a fair game, surprisingly.
Right, yeah, but even then, they would probably get totally destroyed, right?
I wouldn't be surprised with, like, a 7-1 or 7-2.
I'm not saying there's a silver bullet here, right? I'm just saying that...
Yeah, it's really difficult.
What I would like to do is find ways like that around the problem, because the only other thing we can do is magically increase the player base, and as soon as Hogwarts accepts me, I'll let you guys know. But yeah, until then, it's really just gonna have to be clever little hacks like that can make this game playable with people who are of radically different skill, right? And that's kind of where we're at,
Out of curiosity, why does the game even have a ranked mode? A lot of the solutions to fix a game with a low player base pool right now seem like band-aids to me. It seems like they just can't solve the ultimate issue, which is the player base, I guess, but you could boil it down further. Why is there a ranked mode, I guess, is just a quick question.
Why there's a ranked mode is people talk about how they've got a place on the leaderboards, right? And how do I put this?
I could flip it around and say, why is there a casual mode then? Why isn't there just one mode that it has the elo, like it match makes, but rather than splitting the player base across multiple modes?
Totally understand. The reason is if you put total noobs in directly into the ranked mode, which is something that did happen in the alpha, it scares the shit out of them, and they feel this intense social shame of having failed their teammates in a situation with stakes. So that's why.
To be fair, that is currently the case right now anyway.
Right, but the thing is that in casual, right, you can enter into that as a new player, right? And, well, it's just a casual game, nothing was lost, right? They will still feel some amount of, oh god, guys, I'm sorry, right? Because it's probably human. But it does really alleviate that. On the other hand, like the rank thresholds not being high enough, okay, we're aware with that. And that is like a very simple problem to solve. You're just changing an integer value, right? It could be 30, it could be 10, it could be 100. Like, I don't know how many games you want to put it at, right? I know that in the case of these like 10-man games that are happening, what they're trying to do is select for teammate quality and make it so that you're not encountering people who are totally new to the game, right? The other purpose of ranked versus casual is to just have 2 game modes, because when we had people playing ranked before, when it was best of 9, they would complain that games are way too long, right? So casual was like, well, this is kind of the minimum you can do in this game without us cutting down on total number of rounds, and that fucks a lot with game balance. So casual seems to work fine. Ranked as a divergent mode means that it can be more substantial. But yeah, let me just say that we're not very happy with what the state of ranked is right now, and we know that there are a lot of issues with it, so it's not meant to be a defense of how things are. I'm just trying to explain that there are 2 modes for a reason, and that is fundamentally because they're 2 types of players out there, you know.
Yeah, makes sense. I do have something to say on your first point, on like new players. You know, if there was only one game mode, new players coming to it would have a huge sense of pressure on their shoulders. There was one suggestion made a little while back where you could have kind of like a newcomer status where maybe for like your first 25 or 30 games, you would be heavily prioritized to be put in games with mostly or maybe only people with less than 25 or 30 games. And then once you get out of that, you're chucked into the deep end. And so that would give people a break. And you could even tell that to people that you're currently you currently have the newcomer status or whatever, and that would probably take some pressure off their shoulders if they're going into one game mode. Well, they're probably going to be matched up with other brand new people, and I think that would also mean that you could also even have experienced players be able to queue in with those newcomers if they solo queue or something like that. That's just
so. Can you? Just so I am following. Could you just repeat? It's a separate game mode, like essentially kiddie pool for noobs. Is that what you're saying?
It's not a separate game mode. It queues into the same, one game mode. But anyone with the newcomer status would be heavily prioritized to be queued up against other, other newcomers.
Yeah.
So if there's no other newcomers, they just get chucked into the deep end. It's whatever. But
totally
if there are other newcomers, yeah.
Yeah. Would love to do that. Requires higher concurrency. That's the problem, is that we're at a state where it's just like the matchmaking is, are there people with the same region looking at the same time? That's the sort of like actionable criteria, right? Like skill is of course a factor, but given that there's like you see the problem here, right? Is that it's like there just aren't enough people online to actually match based on skill versus just, do they have the same server in common? Do they have a pulse, right? Like that's kind of where we're at, right? And it's just sort of like the fundamental problem here, right? Is a session-based multiplayer game with a low concurrency, right? And honestly, I think it's kind of a miracle that we're still going, right? Because any other game of this setup would be dead by now, in terms of like you get to a low point like this, right? And things bottom out pretty quickly,
I think that's actually something that I really liked about you guys. And like when I first found out about this game, was that I heard that like it was listed on Steam, and I thought that marketing strategy was great. Because you know that there's problems with the game, that there's going to be tons of bugs, and in order for people to find the game, they had to find a link to that store page. So they're going to already know a bit about the game, and they're already going to understand the basics, and they're already going to know that it's in super early access, and that it's going to be buggy and stuff like that. And so you're going to have players that won't really care about that. Like maybe they'll leave, but they'll be likely to come back. You won't have this huge influx of players that will immediately shit on the game because it's early. Just because
it was very, very early then, right?
So I think
insulate us.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think that a huge reason that the game has survived this long is that kind of marketing strategy, that you're not just immediately marketing it to everyone. You're really targeting specific groups. I think that's really good.
All right, let's try to speed this up a little bit so we get through a few more topics. I think we discussed this pretty in depth now. So I'd say we go on. Billboard should be the next one on the list with the next topic or question.
Yeah.
Rather.
So as one of the, I'd probably say the more frustrating things that happens when I play would say when I'm going up to a door and a nice defender opens that door and then sprints through me with a shotgun and murders me. When will we see player collision?
Well, basically Vince will have to implement it as a precursor to enable the shield. So I can't give a when yet, but it is that's what Vince is going to be working on, is gameplay stuff. So I think it's pretty important. I think he thinks so too. It's just we're just trying to get to the point where we can start working on it. So like there used to be player collision for a good reason, right? It just did not make it into the refactor because we really had to do ruthlessly cut every single thing that we could in order to make that thing work as quickly as possible. And that really sucks. And I know that there's still all sorts of to call it polish is kind of a disservice. I think it's really soul, right? A lot of soul was lost, but it's still the same team that made that soul is here, right? So we're gonna put it back in. It's gonna take a while because it took us years before, yeah. So.
All right.
And I was gonna say I'll add one little side step to that along the same lines of pretty important player impact of it, especially too of player frustration is the dreaded flashbang question. When will we see hopefully flashbang occlusion being fully fixed, because I know we've seen the actual flashing changed, but the actual the stun effect where your screen's shaking, things like that, still goes through objects, and I know that is a big frustration among a lot of players.
The pieces are in place to do it. It's just essentially I don't know. Here's the question: do we want to do that before we address recoil or after? Because that's the priority, right? Is what I'm talking about. It's just a matter of when. But from a for all of these things that you're talking about right now, it's one guy working on it, right? And so that's kind of the rub, is this team should be larger, right? Most multiplayer FPS games are not made on a team of less than 20 people, right? But that's how it is. So, that's sort of the compromise we have to take, is things will take longer. But flashbang occlusion is actually very close to being achievable, simply because so Adam Balk is our audio engineer, and he came in and implemented audio occlusion that before was really, really simple. Now it's a notch above that simple, in that instead of it just being anything in the way of your audio listener will occlude the sound effect, right? I don't know, a bag of chips or something, right? Now it looks at a tag to see, is this object tagged with an occlusion value? And then if it isn't, it applies just the tiniest bit of occlusion, because it's if I snap my fingers behind this desk or something, right, then it'll sound different than me doing it above the desk, right? But then for walls and stuff, it has to be specially tagged to actually occlude. The good news is that we can use that same tag system to identify, is a flashbang occluded, right? Now, it's not the whole system that we had before, where it's the flashbang could land on the other side of a threshold, right? And if you're playing right there on that door and that flash is right around the corner from you, it would follow that the concussion from that flashbang would travel through the portal, right? And then hit your ears and then give you a stun effect, right? It won't work like that. So if you goof up your flash and it just lands on the wrong side of the door, it will do nothing to this guy, right? But on the other hand, it does mean that if you're in a hallway in Kill House or something, you're not going to receive every single flashbang in the world, right? So, it's I literally just added a task for that on our time management thing. So it will be done. It's just, again, a question of priority.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. Then Revenant is eager to ask more questions, I'm sure.
Boy, am I. Yeah. So my next question is about Dome, but I'll preface it by saying this. I think we all, as a community and as players, understand the gameplay purpose behind a lot of the stuff that's in each of the tile sets. And I think even with Dome, we understand the purpose of Observation Room. But specifically, what is the design goal behind the exterior windows on Dome? What is the purpose of them, really?
It is a thematic purpose, which is... how do I put this? If you don't make a commitment to the architectural features of a structure, right, then, like, what's the point, right? Like, why have anything other than, say, the abstract rooms of the Boxman version, right? Like, this is sort of the point that I'm trying to hammer with levels in the kill house, right? Like, I hate brick house, right? Like, as a room. And I don't hate it because its design is wrong. I hate it because, like, what is it? What's the purpose of this room, right? Like, there is none. No room looks like this, right? Like, it doesn't have any real world analog to it, right? And I just don't think that we can do that, just sort of make things up and be like, well, it just is this way, cuss, right? So the window, and my God, there is, if you want someone to blame for the windows, it's me. It's not anyone else, because the whole world was kind of pushing back against it, right? But the point of the windows is that if you're going to have some kind of live blood sport event, right, that people are showing up for instead of tuning in on a TV, why would they do that when it's just a concrete box and then you kind of like just hear the gunfire, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense, that they would just come in and look at a Jumbotron, right? Like, the reality is that you show up to a sports game or a gladiatorial game to see the action happening on the inside. And so I insisted that it's got to be this ballistic glass all around, that, yeah, there are all sorts of awful things that happen when it comes to visibility and, you know, but there's this commitment that we have to make that there's a logic to how the world works, right? And that means certain things must follow. And ultimately because it used to be a lot worse with Dome, right? Where essentially the attacker plan was known to the defenders from the start because they could always see which way they're going and with what gear, right? Now, at least, there is an element of surprise preserved by you being able to path underneath the level to arrive at where you're at. But, you know, I understand that there's always going to be obtuse tells that come from some guy standing in a castle and he sees you, right? And basically, if people have input on that, on how to fix it, I'm all for it. But mostly people just tell me remove the windows, and it's like the solution to everything can't just be remove the windows, right? Like, for instance, we got the lobby tile in or reception is what it's called in Kill House.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the architectural constraint of reception is it is floor to ceiling glass, right? And it is an easy entry, right? And you have to, as a level designer, work around that constraint. Like, maybe you don't put the bomb in there, right? And that's just how it is in terms of, like, you kind of have to, like, observe these principles of this is how the structure should operate, because if you don't, you end up in... You guys remember how bad Factory used to be?
Yeah.
Like, Factory was... Oh well, I guess only Billboard played it in alpha.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah,
I only
think so.
caught the tail end
I
of
was
Alpha with
pretty.
Roach, yeah.
Yeah, I was pretty late alpha.
Billboard factory. Tell me how awful it was. Just lay it on me.
It was time, especially I remember when pretty much everything was climbable on, and I remember Ozzy being able to look out like the windows on top, like the top windows, being able to look outside and all that. It was a time.
Mm-hmm. And why that essentially happened was we didn't have a strong understanding of what kind of factory is this thing, you know, like what does it do? We still don't have the answer today. It's the screen goo factory, I guess.
Yeah,
but
it makes goo.
You know, if we had like said, okay, it's going to be a steel mill, and then we look at a steel mill and go like, ah, fuck, dude, there are way too many pipes everywhere. It's just going to be a pixel peak nightmare. We got to pick a different theme, right? Okay, we're going to choose like a high-tech car factory because everything is like robots and like hard panels on everything. So you limit the number of pixel peaks and that kind of stuff, right? If we had been more intentional in that process, then I think we'd have arrived at a better playing level because we would have known exactly what the theme was. And Dome was kind of victim to the same thing where we found it out along the way. But from the start, we should have like identified, hey, it's going to be a gladiatorial game, which means you got to see the guys killing each other. Otherwise, what's the point, right? And so I think that that's where the windows went wrong.
Well,
You know?
it sounds like Factory and Dome are very similar in that regard, but do you think that maybe like Factory would have played better if it wasn't the longer sight lines that it has now, or do you think Dome would have played better without the windows? By the way,
long sight lines are good. Go on, Revenant.
I just want to say that I think that I don't know that anyone saw the fix that you guys put in with Dome. I was actually really impressed that you you elevated the entire tile set so that the factors could walk underneath. That was, to me, brilliant. And I think it mostly solved the issue. I'm just surprised to hear you make the comparison to Factory, because I've seen a lot of footage from the old factories, and I was never under the impression that that was actually bad gameplay. It always looked fun to me.
There's some charm to the old Factory, don't get me wrong, right?
It was just never really consistent.
Yeah, that was the problem. It was all over the place, right? Like it was just, you know, the possibility space was just way too wide open, and really like, because you know, there's the sort of there's the QA level of it, right? Of just like we made assets that had bad platforming ramifications, and that led to people getting on top of really, really high objects and shooting you as you came through a green door, right? They're like 50 feet above you and shooting you in the top of the head, and you don't even know what the hell's going on, right? Okay, yeah, that's bad. But that's the like superficial, that's not the deep problem. The deep problem was we didn't know what kind of factory it was, and that led to all this kind of stuff, because it's like, well, we'll just do this and this and this, and we didn't have a strong sense of direction of like, this is what the factory means in terms of gameplay, and this is what the best type of factory is that would satisfy that. And it's kind of because, well, we're learning, right? Like we don't know everything yet. There are all sorts of project reasons as to why that happened too. But yeah, we'll just leave it at that. I just wanted to point out that the sort of like that fix for the windows that you could walk under the level literally came like, I don't know, I think it was 2-3 weeks before release. Like,
yeah, I remember it was
the ultimate audible play right there, and it was extremely painful for the team, and they were not happy with it, but it did at least mitigate the problem enough that it was not, because before it was like the cadets hated the windows so much that it was like, if we release this, it's going to be an insurrection, you know? So I think that kind of quelled the problem enough that it put Dome in a releasable state. And it does seem like, you know, in my experience playing the game, which I know is not like the DPLs because they're going to min-max everything, right? Very rarely does my plan get given away in Dome just because someone saw it, you know?
Yeah, I think in
Right.
terms of the windows, like the main advantage they give you now is you get like a bit of a longer warning that attackers are going up to a red door, because you can, if you're looking at the red door ramp, you can see them walking up to the ramp a decent amount of time. Sometimes the windows are blocked off, so you can't see that, but so it gives you a bit of a kind of heads up that they're going there, so you can rotate a bit quicker. The only other advantage I can think of is if you have a window that's actually looking at the attacker van, you can kind of get an idea of where they're going just in the direction they jump out of the van, kind of thing.
I mean, that's why the entire north side of the dome is concrete, right? It's just there's this inconsistent case where basically level designers, if there's like a notch on the north end that's like meaning there are walls that are vertically aligned from that perspective, those will spawn as windows by default, and sometimes that ends up like there is no automated solution for that, and so there's going to be human error, and that's why that happens, and it sucks, right?
That makes sense.
I just had an idea for how to solve that. One sec.
I guess I can continue on the windows. While you were talking about the like the design reason for the windows, I had an idea, and I think Jamerson also mentioned it in chat, and that was like, have you guys ever thought of just making it one-way glass, like maybe something similar to observation, even?
Yeah, we have, but the problem, right, is that the audience is not real, right, in the game. But if it's one-way glass, then the entire dome, instead of you being in the center, because like the fantasy is like, it's like Gladiator, like the movie, right? And you can see the audience around you and all the lighting effects and that kind of stuff, right? And feels like, okay, you're in a stadium, But if we just make it all like, one-way mirrored glass, then it's like, well, you're in a mirror box now, right? And that's why that doesn't exist. Just believe me, like, I've heard that suggestion too. It makes sense. It's just that really the trick is that the defender is the audience, right, and not the audience, which is just a bunch of sprites. So.
All right, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess it may have like made more sense if the audiences were kind of raised up. Like maybe if you had an audience on, say, Kill House, and they could see in over the walls, and because the roof on Kill House, you can see through it. They'd kind of get a sense of what's going on in the match. That way, maybe that would have been something.
Yeah, that's fair. Like that the entire thing was viewed kind of from above. That.
Yeah, rather than from the sides. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that a dome could have been constructed with
kind of more like
the ballistic glasses on top, right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I'll say we move on from dome. Well, technically it's Roach's turn, but I feel like Roach asked a bunch of follow-up questions, so I think to spread it around a little bit more, we'll go to Billboard directly, and we'll come back to you later. So Billboard,
no worries.
Feel free to grapple the next one.
All right, so I guess my a pretty good question would be how much would you say that the DPL impacts the team's decisions when it comes to gameplay changes and balance changes compared to say casual players?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't really know the answer because I don't think that we're really
because obviously you kind of have to find a balance, right, where because as someone playing at the highest level, you're going to want to min-max everything, so at that point you can kind of those type of players can find exploits in the balance of the game, but there's also, you still have to look at casual players in terms of just the enjoyment of the game in a sense too. So
I just think that what it is they're actually two separate categories of feedback because you frame it as they're both balanced, right? Casual players who play the game infrequently or are new to it have no concept of the game's balance, right? So all their feedback is really usability feedback. Obviously, the DPL, who plays the game to greater depth than I have, they get the balance, right? And so I think they're qualified to talk about balance and say, you know, this and this and this are messing up the game, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that balance is evaluated by the people who play the game a lot. And for new players who are like, well, attackers are too strong and that kind of stuff, right? It's like, okay, well, we get it. But it's just because they like, that's not a balance thing. It's like, okay, when new players complain that attackers are way too OP, this is crazy, blah, 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 right? It's because they don't know how to place a barbed wire, and they also don't know the value of playing a position that can be retreated from a flash, right? Like, those guys are like, wow, I got banged and cleared because they hid right next to a red door, and they got owned, right, by like double flash, and they just died, right? It's like, wow, these guys are OP. And it's like, no, you're bad because we don't know how to teach you how to be good. And that's our failing as the developer, right? Because it's incumbent on us to make it clear. It's just really the best thing we got right now is Revenant explaining the game through videos, right? But obviously you would want a much better, how do I put it, more integrated solution to the problem, right? But it's like, how do you even do that? You know, that's the hard part.
Yeah, kind of better tutorialization in the game itself.
Yeah, certainly. And I just think that the problem is, it's like, it's not, maybe if we spent like a really long time on some super, it's just, tutorialization is a good term, right? Because like any good game, like Mario, for instance, doesn't have a tutorial. The tutorial is you just play the first level. That's the tutorial, right? And the first level introduces concepts to you in a really well-paced way that any stupid video online will like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to call them stupid, but they like, there are multiple videos covering that subject of just how good the Mario tutorial is, right? Awesome. The reason why it exists like that as the first level is no one likes to play tutorials, and as a learning tool, they suck. They're like abysmal, which is kind of like why people still don't even know how to kick a door in our game when they go through a tutorial, even though it's next to the first skill, which is walking, right? The next skill that we teach you is how to kick down a door, and people still don't get it, right? And we were very intentional how we place the player. Like, we put them at an oblique angle so that they actually have to like line up with the door, right? And they still don't get it. And we can give them a text box or whatever that will tell them, but it'll just be in one eye and out the other, so to speak, because tutorials are just, they're bad. They never work. They're, you got to get people to click on them. So
yeah,
you
like
lost a bunch of people right there.
Game.
Yeah,
some people will go into the game wanting to play the tutorial and get to know it, but other people just want to play the game.
Yeah, and it's probably just based on how experienced you're with an FPS, because it's just like,
yeah,
maybe some people are like, I don't know, maybe that's not the determining thing, right? Most people don't click through the tutorial, right? And fewer people go through the videos, unfortunately. But the videos, I think, are actually like the most in-depth in that they really kind of explain to you in certain terms, like, these are the things that you need to do and value when playing this game. And yeah, that's just kind of the rub. I think the best tutorial of all would be if we had a lot of YouTube content of people playing the game, that people would pick up on these nuances and patterns, right? Like, they would develop a heuristic of how to play the game that would serve them much better than any kind of explicit point-by-point tutorial.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would you think of maybe kind of like a hint system Like somebody, like they could toggle it off in the options menu if they really hated it. But maybe like when you open the map, like a kind of pop-up comes up next to the free entrance saying you can kick green doors and you can charge red doors. This is what a shutter does on C-Store, and press this button to, like actually just in game, and they can just click to close it and it will never show up again.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
We call those valve hints, right? Like they're
right. Yeah.
Left 4 Dead has them, right, where they contextually appear, and the context is basically, have you done this N times? If so, we stop showing it, right?
Yeah.
Totally down to do it.
Priorities,
it will help. There's a priorities problem, right? Like it's like, okay, we can either do that or we can do the progression and customization, right? Because that engages the same guy, right? And
makes sense, yeah.
My problem is quite simple. Players don't read. So you give them that thing, right? And the majority of players confronted with the tip screen won't actually read the pros of the tip, right? And that's like...
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
That kind of surprises me, to be honest.
I don't know what to tell you. It's like, it's just how the world is, like...
As the community manager, I can confirm people don't read. Like it's that's
Actually,
making my job so much harder.
I will point one thing out about that is that the load screens that do have tips are all correct, except there's one that says you can shoot out lights, and you can shoot out half the lights in the game.
You can shoot out the emergency lights.
You can shoot out
all they have to do is put
lights,
E
but
in
not
front of the
all of
lights.
them. So I don't know. Have you guys ever talked about that? How maybe people read that one, try it, it doesn't work, and then they just ignore the rest of them? Like, I don't know. Maybe
that's not the reason, but yeah, it is a false affordance, right? So it should be removed. It's just sort of, yeah, we should get rid of it until the lights can turn back on. That is correct. But the problem still is that people don't. It's like, even if they read, it's like they don't understand, right? Like it's like if you read something in a different language, right? It doesn't mean anything to you, right? That seems to be what happens. Way more effective than like tooltips would be like if you look at a door, right, that's closed, then it shows you like a 3D dude kicking a door, right? And then has these sort of like, I don't know, some kind of indicator to like get you to square up with the door, right? Which is very important to our game, the squaring up with the door. Otherwise, people would kick obliquely all the time, and there just wouldn't be. There's no element of risk in kicking doors, and there's no need for someone to cover you or time their flashbangs. It's just like you might as well just be press F to open door at that point, right? That's why you have square up, but it's a huge noob trap because like what other game is like this? And the only other solution we had to the problem was something that will probably work best, which is just when you kick the door, it starts moving you toward the door, and then you kick it, right?
That would actually be pretty nice, to be honest.
Yeah.
There are times where you kind of try and kick the door, and then you have to like budge yourself to the right a bit, budge yourself back. Like,
yeah, sucks,
I just want to kick.
Yeah.
So that would actually be pretty.
And that's
awesome.
what it will be one day. It's just again the priorities problem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The last thing I wanted to kind of add into that as a bit of a sidestep to the kind of the idea of gameplay changes and balance is definitely I think something that's been constantly changing. There was a whole update about it after all, Gunplay 2.0. How do you guys feel right now about the current gunplay and how it could change? Because I know for a fact I have some friends that are other experienced FPS players, and they don't really want to like get into the game purely because the gunplay, at least right now, kind of feels very, I guess, almost bland. And I know gunplay is a very, I guess, blanket term because there are a lot of things that go into it, whether it be animations, recoil, time to kill, things like that. But I guess the question is kind of like, what do you feel the position is right now of how the guns are right now and where they're going to be looking to hopefully go in the future?
Well, the why Gunplay 2.0 happened was to address the blandness, right? And obviously it has not fully addressed it, but why recoil is so much stronger now is so that you can have variation between weapons without, I think, committing kind of the ultimate sin when it comes to modeling firearms is you just start applying arbitrary ranges to weapons, and after a certain point they do less damage, right? The most egregious example of this is in Battlefield 1, where all bolt action rifles are, I guess they're like rocket guns, because they have the initial shot and they do 75 damage out to 75 meters, and then they do 100% damage past that, right? That's just fucking insane, right? Like, are you kidding me? Now, listen, don't get me wrong. If you had done the work and said, yep, this class of weapon are rocket guns, and these do exist. There's a pistol that shot these rocket-powered cartridges, much to like basically it's like a miniaturized recoilless rifle from World War II, right? But it would follow that, like, okay, you know, you've got the initial charge of it moving out the barrel, and then something ignites, which gives it more energy and thus more impact, and you have all of the effects and everything to make this convincing and feel good. Then it's like, okay, cool. But like, from like someone who played a lot of Battlefield 1, it just felt like, I can't believe you've done this, is really the like that meme is so applicable, because it's just like, are you serious? Like, it's just awful, you know? Which is why I would only play on the hardcore servers in that game, because bullets did damage, and that means that certain guns are much more meta than others, but hey, at least the guns are like guns and they don't feel like made up, right? Anyway, all I'm trying to say is, unless you're committing to made up guns, which I guess we could do, it's you kind of have to push, like, intense recoil is something that makes certain guns fit narrowly into a role, right? So it's like, if you want this gun to be a close range blaster, right, then you got to do something to make it so that you're not just, because before with KRD2U, you used to be able to just walk the recoil and like land shot after shot at very long range, right? And I think that was probably one of the worst changes to the community, was that they felt like their most effective gun just went out the window, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, why that exists is, it's like, we want that class of full auto, very dangerous weapons to exist at a certain threshold, and that is where you're essentially at risk of getting flashbanged, right? So you have to intentionally play instead of just standing at the other end of the room and like perfectly controlling recoil and lasering people to death, and there's really no way to fight them, right? Yeah. Conversely, you're supposed to pick for that role, right, the F1, which is very intentionally designed to have a long ass reload time, so that once you squeeze off all your rounds, now the attackers have a moment where they can push out, throw a flashbang, and exploit the gap, right? And you, as the defender, have to play the weapon to that expectation. So it's like, when you reload, you fall back typically to fight from another position rather than just holding the current spot, because you know you're going to get banged and cleared, right? And so to answer your question in a very roundabout way, am I defending where gunplay ended up and that the community should just be happy with what we did? Tough tits? No, absolutely not. I want Vince to address the community feedback and like do the best that we can do, right? With understanding that what we want to do is create a weapon feel that enables a variety of play styles and doesn't just have clear dominating strategies that you can exploit over and over and over to win, right? And that's why it is how it is, right? There are all sorts of things in gunplay that I personally don't like and really piss me off, right? I would say that honestly, to give Vince a little less heat, I think a lot of the problem with gunplay is just the hit registration right now and the performance of the game. And that if we were to say like snap our fingers and improve those two things into being like, if this game was running at 140 hertz and the hit reg was as crisp as any other, present day shooter, right? Then I don't think people would hate gunplay that much, right? Because like the reality of the matter is that our recoil may be stronger in this game. But when I play a game like Insurgency Sandstorm, like it's the only game that had me increase my sensitivity because I had so much vertical recoil to handle on certain weapons, and I never changed my sensitivity, like you should see my mouse pad. It's like, I think it's 36 inches wide by 17 inches tall. I think it's yeah. So I guess all I wanted to say was just like having some amount of recoil matters. And why I address that is I know certain players are like, this is too much recoil. It just feels like it's ridiculous, right? And strong, I think, is good, but it should still be learnable, right? Like you want it to be something that you can master and not just feel like you're throwing bullets at a wall, because that's not the point of the game, right? So I think we goofed up in how recoil went out, and I don't think we listened to the community enough before we released it, right? Is what I think went wrong. But we will address that, and that is the first thing that I want Vince to address in this next period is like, what are we going to do about Gunplay 2.0? How do we find the best fit for, because they're like diverging complaints among the community, right? It's not unanimous. I wish it was, because it'd be really, really easy to make people happy then, right? But there are basically two camps. That one is like the recoil is like, well, it's kind of not that bad, it's still just kind of uninteresting, right? And the other camp is like, this is way too hard, it's stupid, I played this game for it to be casual, and now this thing is like far too much for me, Yeah. And it's hard to, it's going to be difficult to walk a line between those 2 points.
Yeah, I think it definitely comes to a balance of what I would say is like what I would call like weapon classes, and then still making the weapons within those classes into individual to each other. I think one example I can make, it's not probably the best example in this case because of the sake of recoil not really being a huge factor, but I would say Hunt Showdown is a great game to talk about individuality in weapons. There are different weapon classes, of course. There are pistols, there are shotguns, there are rifles, which all do different things at different ranges, so they're going to have better times in each encounter. But also, the weapons that are under those subsets, like the rifles, the pistols, whatever, each weapon does feel very individualistic in its scenario of how it's used or compared to each other.
Yeah, I would agree with
you'll
that.
Have one shotgun that's a double, or like one shotgun at that is good in close range, or you'll have like another shotgun that is a breech loading shotgun but is good at a further range than all the other shotguns. But takes more time to reload.
Yeah, and that's where we want to go, right? And I think Hunt Showdown's weapon design is a big inspiration for us, right? Because what we want to do is, in the long term, have less, how do I put this? It's really easy to make an assault rifle, right? Because we already have one. So just do it again and make it slightly different in its stats, right? But they all have the exact same kind of pacing, and really any kind of changes you make to the weapon in terms of their stats are totally superficial, right? But where the meat and potatoes is for guns and making them feel cool and different is action, right? So it's like, you got a lot of repeating action weapons in Hunt Showdown. You got a lot of breech loading firearms. You've also got the what would you even call a revolver, right? Like revolving cylinder action, right?
Single action, double action.
Yeah. I suppose what I mean is like they've got really cool guns that have different ways of handling them and ramifications for how you deal with it, right? On the other hand, I would say that they're like, what's the pistol where you've got the it's like the revolver that was converted to be
the chain pistol?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Belt fed.
Yeah.
I can't think of a. Really, it's just if you just have two of those, what's the point of any other gun other than a sniper to like dome someone? Like, you know, like maybe you have the close range specialization on the other end to like insta one shot a guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, it does seem like that game is still prone to totally dominating loadouts where it's like this is optimal, you know. So everyone falls into the trap, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, there's certain levels of optimization, I think, in that game. But just to counteract to your example, I guess the way the downside of the chain pistol, for example, is there's a trait in that game called fanning, you know, where you can just let it rip. And obviously, it sounds like the chain pistol would be the best in class for fanning, but the way they balance it is the spread of the bullets when you're fanning is the worst of the chain pistol. It's the least accurate compared to all the other weapons that you can fan with, and it's the same thing with the dual wielding systems, right? So if you bring two chain pistols, they have pretty bad hip fire spread, so it's going to be more random compared to bringing maybe like other pistols that have, you know, less bullets in the chamber.
Yeah, I understand that there's more nuance than I laid out, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to point out that those changes emerge in response to the weapon itself being like inherently powerful in its design, right? And it's not like it's an unsolvable problem, but at the patch that I played, they were just ridiculous, right? I haven't played lately, so I'm sure they addressed the issue with, you know, what you're talking about. But the cool thing, right, is you want to just have like a variety of different guns that work in different ways and have quirks, right? And strengths and weaknesses, you know? And that's definitely what we want to do with the defender guns and not just spam assault rifle variants, you know?
On that note, actually, I was going to ask quickly, you mentioned you don't like damage reduction over distance, but that actually is a factor in the game. Now it's only on shotguns, but for a significant period of time, it was also on the knack. What was is that just because that's okay to do it on one gun, even if it's not preferable, or can you walk me through that?
Well, the thing is, does it violate player expectation, right? That's the thing. And it's like, if I'm shooting something that looks like an M16 in a game, right? And it sort of just tuckers out after a certain range, right? I'm going to be like, that's stupid, right? On the other hand, if it's a shotgun, if you do the full commitment to realism that something like Tarkov does, right? You do get the unfortunate you get an unfortunate reality check, which is that each of those little pellets in a double-aught buck is essentially the same energy as a 9mm round, right? And it's totally possible to wing someone at very, very far ranges and just get lucky because you hit him in the face, right? And that's, I think, where damage fall-off comes in. Obviously, we don't have an extreme scenario as what Tarkov has in engagement ranges, but you do want the gun to hit really, really powerfully in a certain range and to not totally smoke someone like half the time at other ranges, right? You want them to, like, it's better that it would consistently do some amount of damage at this range rather than have it be just totally random as to whether or not it kills, right? So that's why that exists for shotguns, and I think they're very much a special case in that regard. But like on the other hand, with the knack, Personally, I'm not thrilled with that solution, but
Well, it doesn't have it anymore after Gunplay
Okay.
2.0, and I just kind of mean like the AP25. Is it off the table for that?
I think you and I had a conversation where you brought up that maybe that could be the solution. What I'm not saying anything here is off the table or on the table. I'm voicing my personal preference, right? But if you give me an AP25 and I shoot it, and it does have the damage fall off, but it feels good, right? Okay. I just doubt it'll feel good. That's the problem.
Fair, yeah. I just didn't know if that was like a big part of the design was making sure that that was eliminated from the game. I just didn't know if that was like an opportunity that you wanted to explore, or if you had a hard sort of barrier or border around that.
No, it's just like if you shoot a guy 6 times, right, up close and it kills him and that feels good, but then you shoot him in a much more difficult scenario 6 times, because the target's much smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't kill him, then you're going to be like, that's bullshit, right? Like, what the fuck? So I think that's the emotion I'm trying to play against, right? On the other hand, if it's really difficult to shoot that guy because recoil is, the recoil of the weapon is a consideration, right? Then at least there's sort of a way to kind of like skill your way out of the problem. But it's like, essentially when you do damage fall off, the commitment you're making is no matter how good you are, there's nothing you can do in the situation, which I don't know. I just appropriate to more abstract ideas like magic, right? But for something as concrete as how a firearm handles, right? It's the Windows all over again, really, is what I'm saying. It's like you just kind of got to make certain commitments to authenticity, especially in like a tactical shooter, of course, right?
Can I ask like a full question then, kind of in regards to this, which would be, is a weapon having a poor sight picture a genuine way of balancing that weapon? And to even just give it a couple examples, I'll say the Gruber, that's an easy one, but I'll say...
How about having intentionally misaligned sights?
No, not that. Not misaligned sights, but speaking to muzzle flash and other things, and a sight picture that's got a low height over bore, or in the case of something like the Mop, how big and how thick in pixels the scope's crosshair is. Would cleaning up that crosshair be considered a buff or a quality of life change to you?
Oh, it's any change to a weapon is a buff or a nerf, right? Barring totally superficial things, right?
Sure.
Any functional change. I am not opposed to buffing the Mop by just fixing the crosshair pattern, right? Like, let's do it. That's fine. Trying to remember what the thing looks like. Does the Mop still have the negative space in the crosshair?
The Saber definitely does.
It has a circle, yeah. Does the Mop though? I don't remember.
The Mop in the middle doesn't have anything. It just has green bars.
Silver says yes.
4 things, right?
I like negative space in crosshairs. Some people don't, right? So I'm pretty sure I was the guy who made that graphic, and someone can fact check me, but
I'm looking at it right now.
Maybe it's an evolution of the thing that I did, but I'm pretty sure I implemented scopes to begin with, right? I'm not opposed to it changing. It's illuminated so that you can see in the dark is why it exists that way. And part of the shitty shader that we have for it is it just does all sorts of crap where it wigs out with the there's like a depth of field effect on it or something that causes it to get all like weird looking, right? Where it fuzzes out, right? All that should be fixed. It should be a nice like if it was a single green pixel, perfect. Like I'm not even opposed to people setting their own crosshair, for God's sake. It doesn't matter to me. Because the point of the weapon, right, is shoot the head and they're dead, right? And I don't want to get in the way of that, so it's like, go for it. On the other hand, people do complain about the NAC 11, right? And this is sort of a problem. Is it's just like, well, on one hand, I hear the complaints, right? And I understand that this feels bad to them. They don't like it, right? But on the other hand, the weapon is designed that way with the vertical compensator built into, like, so it's got a ported barrel on the top, if you look at it. And if you look at, say, like a Glock 18 firing, when they go off, all that muzzle blast goes straight up, and you can't see the target anymore through your irons. But the intention of that was that people simply use it as a brace fire weapon, you know?
Sure.
And so, like, I don't know, I guess there's sort of like a philosophical debate as to how usable each mode of a weapon is supposed to be, right? But, you know, on the other hand, like, I don't like that the F1 has the weapon spread, by the way. That's one of the commitments to realism thing that I was talking about, that it's like, no, like,
Right.
bullet goes where barrel points gun. If you want spread, then move the gun around, right? But if that gun is a beast in brace mode, right, then now it's just an all-purpose gun, you know? Like, we're infringing on the role that it's supposed to occupy as a backline support gun rather than frontline, like, immediate, I don't know what you'd call it. It's like a brawler is kind of the wrong term, because it's more like a katana or something, where it's just a single strike is what's going to win the fight. That's where the knack would be, right? Or where a shotgun would be, right? So yeah, it's just like why guns don't work in certain modes in terms of muzzle blast and stuff getting in the way is likely intentional, right? On the other hand, am I totally sensitive to the general argument that muzzle blasts are getting in the way and affecting readability? Like, yeah, okay, let's fix it, you know? Like, for instance, something I talked about with Valdis was if we take our smoke patterns and make them less clouds, right, and more smoke rings, then it follows that the center of that smoke ring will be the clearest point on your screen, right? And so you can still get big effects in the peripheral to get the kind of like emotional payload of shooting a gun, but it doesn't have to functionally interfere with the job you're trying to do.
All right, thanks. Do you have a specific comment on the Gruber, just really quickly? Because that is a gun that I think is designed around headshots, but doesn't have an optic like the Ingmar does, for example. If you don't have a comment on that gun specifically, that's all right.
It has rails on the top of it, right?
Okay, thank you. That's all I need to hear.
Yeah, I think that the Gruber's iron sights are abysmally fat is the problem, honestly.
Sure.
Like, if we can just adjust the sight picture and maybe some of how the muzzle blast displays, like, you know, like, let's say it had like a horizontal compensator on it, then it could clear up the sight picture enough that you can still get headshots with it, and it becomes like a close to mid-range headshotter, and then maybe you can upgrade it to have, you know, magnification if you want to backline with it, you know?
Right. Thank you.
All right. That was a lot of gun talk, but that makes a lot of sense since we're playing a shooter here, right? So I think it's an important conversation to have. But let's move to the next topic. So Revenant, if you have another interesting question for us. I'm sure you do.
I suppose I do. I have a few. I would like to ask about attackers and defenders. I want to ask this. Nearly every experienced player that is currently asserting that defending is more fun than attacking, myself included. I have yet to hear anyone who thinks that once they get a little bit of experience that attacking is still as fun. How will you make attacking feel more than just the power fantasy and make it feel more strategic and more involved?
Well, it's probably the flashbangs, right? Because it seems like how do I put this? all the pieces are in place for the attackers to be intensely strategic, right? Like they have a full armament of interesting utilities. I know they're still missing the shield, but there's like a lot of cool stuff they can do with the tools that they have, right? I think that the problem is that the flashbangs are so powerful that they're just kind of like a bit of a crutch, and they allow them to get away with too many mistakes by simply flashing through all the problems, right? That's my guess, and I think really the only difference between now and then is the audio occlusion code that drove how flashbangs behave is not in, so they're just that kind of dead simple. There just aren't enough cases that stop the flashbang from just totally ruining you, right? And if we can tune flashbangs to be a bit more precise in their application, right, then that would be good. I would also, personally, I know we did this in the past in the alpha and didn't go so hot. I hate that attackers have to budget their flashbangs out one bang per guy per round, because I don't think they should be going into any situation without full utility. And flashbangs should just be the, well, if nothing else, I'll just take this, right? It's just that the problem is, how do you make them powerful enough that they're meaningful, but not so powerful that if numerous, that they're just all over the place all the time, and you just can't play the game because you're in a constant state of flash, right? That's basically what happened when we experimented with that in the alpha. But it really ought to be like, you shouldn't have to go into situations because, like, without a second utility, just because, well, no use for a smoke grenade this round, so I guess I'll just go in with nothing, right? I think that's super lame. On the other hand, if we had like things like gas grenades is something that we wanted to do for a long time, right? Then it could be that grenades get filled out to a point that they're just naturally more options, so your inventory gets filled up. But yeah, I'd say it's probably just being able to flash through any problem is the biggest issue, and then maybe a bit more emphasis on locking down an angle with black tars would be helpful, in that if they had that kind of power of just saying, no, you can't push this, then it means that we can reduce the effectiveness of other things, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
It's like, it's just sort of like, if you strengthen this one thing, it means that something else can naturally be weaker and require a bit more finesse to get through, rather than just like,
I imagine that hit reg and servers and performance, like a lot of this is a domino effect, where I know the black tar isn't as strong as it should be on paper just because of muzzle flash and hit reg. That's just the case with a higher rate of fire semi-auto weapon, I think. So I'm not sure that you could balance that right now in the game state, but it seems like on paper it probably would work out better.
I would say that peeker's advantage in our game is probably a big problem too, because if you think about it, like, attackers are more often than not the ones that peek, right? And that's, listen, if you can just walk through a doorway and shoot someone, right, like, then may not even be the flashbangs. So it's probably all of the above, right? And I think as the game improves on the more basic level, the attacker-defender dichotomy will become more and more clear, right? It's just the waters are a bit too muddied, and that's probably why attackers feel OP right now.
Right. Do you think that attackers should be stronger than defenders? And where should their strength come from if that's the case? Should it come from passive things or from proper utility?
I think that from a base fantasy level, right? If you got a bunch of like RoboCop dudes with armor on, right, they should maybe not take more time to kill, right? But they will require more firepower to defeat, right, than the guys on the other side who are totally unarmored, right? It did help the attackers a lot by making them a bit tankier, because what that meant was their plan was less likely to get totally scratched by just one guy catching around and then everything is gone, right? So it diminished the value of there's still a lot of value to cheeky plays, right? But it just helps that you can basically shoot into a bunch of guys and that damage gets distributed among them a bit more equally rather than you're just striking guys off the roster, right? So that's why they're tankier, is it just makes them more robust, and it means that the defenders can't just shoot their way through the problem of attackers are coming, and they actually have to plan crossfires. That's probably the biggest reason why attackers take more health, is it's like, yeah, you have to snare them and get them into a position where it's a 2v1, right? Like, that's the point, you know? It's kind of like this, like, I play a lot of this awful game called War Thunder, which I think Red Commissar also plays, I noticed. But if you're playing a game where, like, both sides have the exact same planes, it's pointless, right? Because they have totally identical capability, and it's not very interesting. Even if there is an imbalance between two planes, right? If they're imbalanced in different directions, what that means is you adapt your strategy based off that. So I think asymmetry is just far more rewarding design path for things, right? And asymmetry in health would follow, because you do want the guys who are meant to kick down doors to be more robust than, you know, the guys that just have to defend those doors, right? But yeah, why do you ask? Is there, like, are people pinning it on health or something? What's the issue?
I am not sure of the individual reasons. All I can assert with certainty is that everyone I've spoken to enjoys defense more. If I had to guess or offer some insight, I think the dynamic of barbed wire, Molotovs, and unique weapons together makes for, also wall bangs, make for a lot more strategy. It's much more active in planning when you're on defense. I often notice when you start on attack is mostly drawing the line here and figuring out if the secondary objective is worth taking or not. It's kind of a simple binary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising you'd expect, like, attacker to be more planning, because you have to enter the place, but in reality, planning out your defense is actually much more engaging.
I will say, to kind of devil's advocate a little bit of the idea of, you know, like, you know, attackers' HP, you know, being higher, is one thing that can be, like, one thing I think that's very, that feels really good in FPS games is, you know, getting those clutch scenarios. And I feel like, you know, because of of how HP values are between attackers and defenders, it feels like near impossible to get to ever win those, you know, maybe like 1v5 scenarios or anything like that. Which, of course, you know, shouldn't necessarily be always winnable, but it really feels like it's a very hard. It's hard to ever win those scenarios almost ever with how attacker HP is much higher, or well, higher than defenders are.
Yeah, certainly.
I don't even think that's necessarily down to the HP value, but more how the kind of time to kill works. Like, you can do those kind of 1v5 clutch situations in a game like CSGO or Siege, because you can just, like, turn a corner, kill a guy 100 HP to 0 instantly before you can get a single bullet off. And it's a similar thing in CSGO, like, maybe like every second enemy will get a bullet off if you're really on point. But in due process, I mean, you have to hit a few bullets on the target in order to kill them, at least. Most of the time, you know, more than a few. The person's probably going to turn around and get a couple of shots off on you as well. And so once you go through 1, 2, 3, and then like maybe even 4 or 5, at that point you're just dead. Unless you get like, unless you do really good positioning, get lucky, just get super strong angles and like catch them off guard and stuff like that constantly, and put yourself into the constant 1v1s, is pretty rare that you'll be able to win like 1v3s and above.
That's exactly what I would say. Is at least it's a little bit of a problem for me. Is I feel like at least as as a defender, if you're going against an attack team that is going to be sloppy enough to push you one by one, you should in theory be able to like win, have a chance to at least win that out. When it does feel like that, if you're going against a team that this is like fantasy scenario that let's say the attackers didn't really ever take any damage ever, and you also didn't, in those 1vx scenarios, it's pretty much almost near impossible to win, even with them pushing you one by one, because they will slowly tick damage you as well as a defender. So
yeah, I've seen a couple 1v4 situations, and I'll tell you, I can't think of a single one that wasn't with a shotgun, because they turn the corner, bang, turn the corner, bang. Like, the shotgun just insta kills, and so they don't take any damage. Like, it's definitely most common with shotguns.
Right, and I think the only way we could possibly achieve such a thing is to have higher headshot damage. And on one hand, increases the clutchability, but I would say that clutchability is sort of inversely relational to the planability of the game, right? Because if if someone can 1v4 like me, here, I'll tell you what we can do. We can do a headshot bonus if you're the last guy alive, right? Because the problem is that the problem is, unless you're willing to like commit to nonsense, right, then you're always going to have this issue where entire plans are just going sideways because one guy's really good with his gun and is racking up headshot after headshot, right? And that's kind of how Siege plays out, right? It's like, it's not like they went for the planning aesthetic, right? But
trust me, I have plenty of problems with the one-shot headshot mechanic.
Yeah.
At least, especially that you can just do it through walls. That is
honestly, not to talk too much about Siege, but like, it's just bizarre to me because half their operators have like headgear on, and they're supposed to be like super spec ops dudes, right? So the justification exists to have multi-shot headshots, and I think that they would have had a much stronger competitive game. Hard for me to really throw stones, given if you look at their concurrency versus ours, right? But it just seems like strange. Like, why? Because it's just so random. So much of how the game unfolds is just the first guy who got a headshot won the duel, and it doesn't seem very nuanced, I guess.
I'm inclined to agree. I also played a good bit of Siege, and I think a lot of us are refugees. I appreciate that this game does not have instant kill headshots, except on the power weapons. So
right, yeah, because if you headshot a guy with a shotgun or a sniper, then it's like, you earned it, right? You positioned to do the job, but yeah.
All right. Any more follow-ups to that, or?
I think if we could move to final questions, because it looks like the bank thing is about to start.
All right, so one more question, or one...
I have to go to the bank, guys. I
I'm running low on money.
Oh boy. So I guess one more question. Let's give the last one to Roach.
Let me bring it up. My final question would be, how far from release do you feel the game is? How many tile sets do you plan on releasing the game with, and do you plan on continuing development after release?
We are already released in practical terms.
More kind of from like early access.
Sure, I understand. I don't know when 1.0, as it were, will be. I don't know. Like, I guess I want to circle around and ask you: does 1.0 mean something to you? Because to me, it doesn't. But then, as for maps, it seems like maybe every 9 months to a year we would do a new tile set. So,
Okay.
you know, we're trying to
in
figure out what
terms
the
of-
cadence will be.
Right, fair enough. Yeah, in terms of the difference between like early access and like full release, for me, if I buy an early access game, I'm buying it expecting it to, expecting like maybe even the core gameplay mechanics to change. Like I go in there, I'm like anything could change. If I buy a game that's says it's fully released, I could expect some updates here and there, some content, new content, new maps, new stuff like that. But I'm gonna expect the core gameplay to stay the same. I'd assume you'd want to get the guns to a state where they're like, like almost exactly how you want them and stuff like that, so that you won't feel like you'll need to adjust them in any major ways after full release. That's kind of the difference that I'd feel between early access and full release.
Okay. Well, yeah, I would say, like, by that definition, right, we're going to be in early access for years and years, because I think there's a lot of how do I put this? I don't want to be like, those hero shooters where they've got like a new operator, agent, or whatever, and that's not the like content model for this game, right? We're a lot closer to Counter-Strike in that we're trying to get to done, right? But
Yeah.
I want done to be fairly broad, right? And very, there's only so many gadgets that we can say give the attackers before it's total cognitive overload, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think we're there yet, right? Because we're probably like at half of that capacity, I would say, because mostly you're just struggling for a plan to make, because really it's just flash here, go here. But you want more like decisive options in the vein of the NVGs available to you, right? They don't have to be as like globally debilitating as the NVGs, right? But it just feels really good in that moment to like get the breaker, nods on, and then you're like having your Zero Dark 30 moment, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are a few more of those that are achievable, so
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I mean, there's plenty of early access games, that went into early access, years and years ago, and that I've seen recently full release, and they've changed so much since then, and like it's really awesome to see that progression. So it's not uncommon for early access games to be there for years, but it's nice to have that answer.
And even then, it just seems like, if you release a game like Counter-Strike has all sorts of new stuff happening to it, even though the core of the game exists in relative steady state, right?
Yeah, like new maps or rework maps, stuff like that.
Totally.
Even new guns sometimes.
And I think also with the sort of like procedural nature of level progression means that levels are going to be kind of living objects that just keep on having changes done to them, and we want to preserve their like spirit, right? But it's sort of I think in the way that things exist, it's kind of hard not to make changes. So
yeah, makes sense.
Any last questions? Okay.
Well, I guess, I mean, this is, I could ask this real quick, but it's definitely one of these like priority list questions. But are there any plans to make a like private match or custom match system, for like for example, maybe for like DPL teams, or just people trying to even get better, just to be able to practice like grenade throws, or like things like that?
Oh, well, I'd like to. Okay, how about, can I rephrase it to desires instead of plans?
Yeah.
Because it's like there are few plans because there's only so much we can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are plenty of desires, and one of the desires that I have is how like you have like you load up Call of Duty 4 and you play the campaign, and you go through the kill house with the ship level, and then you're playing the ship level afterward, right? for you to basically be able to do some kind of drill with your team that's not just like it's not just like fun, it's trying to let you refine a skill, right? Like entering a door, flashing the room, and then killing everyone in it, right? Like if you could get really, really good at that, right, as a team, that would have a lot of value, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of known in the tactical business as flow drills, right? I'd love to have a feature like that where instead of it just being kind of like a meme, it's like a real time trial that takes a great deal of skill and intentionality to do well, right? Like a kind of tactical puzzle, if you will. I think that would be cool. In terms of sorry, I was on VoIP with another guy. I'm trying to listen to this game in progress, but how do I put this? The custom games, like I'd like it to be more than just like a passworded thing, but that's all we can really afford in implementation costs right now, you know? And I think that that's kind of like the main issue is one day there will be proper custom games, right? But we're kind of going to have to live with this system for the time being. If there's sort of like some kind of a pitch of like, here's something that we think would be easy to accomplish and doesn't require too much of a change from what already exists, right? Hey, let me hear it, you know? But it's just sort of like a full-on custom game, like as robust as something that you find in Overwatch is going to be like pretty much impossible to deliver within the next couple of years, you know? Sorry, I know that's not very encouraging a response, but you know. Anyway, I do have to move on to this playtest, so if there's one last question, let's do it. Otherwise, you can wrap up.
I'm sure Revenant has another one for us.
Not any short ones. I'll wait for the next Q&A. I think I'm all set. Thanks very much.
All right.
Yep,
fair
of
enough.
course. Yeah, I was very happy to do this, and I hope you know, you found my responses valuable.
Yeah, this was
And
great.
Thank you.
cool.
All right.
Thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate all the questions and the thought that went into this. So
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much from me as well to all three of you, and obviously to you, Baard, as well. Giving the community a little bit more insight into the development and the future of the process. I think this was very valuable, and we'll do these kind of things. We'll see if we keep the format or change it a little bit or mix it up. But we definitely plan to do more of these Q&A things in the future as well. So look out for them. And for now, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Well, we'll see you around for the next one and our other streams and stuff, and in the game, obviously. So thanks a lot for watching. Have fun, and see you next time.
thanks, guys. Thanks to the listeners.
This is one, I'm receiving at 39. 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 Frank. at 39. Mr. Swan, I'm receiving at 39. George.